do is just allow Cleveland, if you'd like to introduce yourself and kind of give us your background and credentials. And then I know I have a handful of questions I would love to ask you. And then anything else, Nicole, that you'd like to ask, and Cleveland, anything that you'd like to share in terms of how you think you might be able to help us and the temperature of the market these days, and anything else you think we might need to know as we start to embark on this journey. As individuals, we may even come together and try to purchase a property, but yeah, if you just share who you are, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Well, first, I want to say thank you very much for having me on this call. As you mentioned, my name is Cleveland St. Prey. I lead a very active commercial real estate team here in Boca Raton, Florida. We specialize in the sale of retail, office, and industrial warehouses in Broward County, North Miami-Dade, and the Palm Beach area. And as you mentioned, that we were able to connect at Biz to Biz. So my way of connecting with investors and professionals, entrepreneurs, is by meeting them face to face, and also via cold calling. So my networking efforts are focused on just helping investors like you who don't know about the commercial real estate space, who are looking to figure out where can I find an investment where it makes sense, and how I can help guide you through the process and show you the pitfalls, but also the opportunities in the market. Every market is different, so it's very important that you have a professional guiding you through the steps, letting you know what to look for, especially when it comes to buying an asset. As you already know, when it comes to being an investor, it's where the profit is made when you buy, in the buy. And so in commercial real estate, there's no difference. It's just knowing the difference between a good opportunity and a bad one. And so, I'm open for questions, whatever you may be interested in. I'm here to, answer that. But just before we go into the questioning, or if you have any questions, my journey started around 3 years ago with SVN Commercial Partners. When I got into the business, my goal was to just focus on property owners and listings. And what that basically looked like was cold calling them, looking for opportunities in the market. And when I started doing that, interest rates, as you know, have increased over the past couple of years.
Sure.
And interest rates going as high as 7, 8%. And a lot of investors put their pencils down and decided not to invest as much. There are very few savvy investors that are looking to buy and acquire properties in South Florida, due to the fact that Florida has a very high demand. Many people from all across the country is coming down here, from California, New York, the Midwest, and we still have an influx of people in the population. The growth in population have made Florida a very unique place to invest. With that being said, it has also made it a very high demand and has affected the supply. So low supply, which drives prices up. And so it takes a lot of creativity in this market to find a deal. But that's why, as I mentioned before, it's good to have a professional to help guide you to see where the opportunities lie. Otherwise, you can't easily pass up a good opportunity if you're not looking in a creative manner. But I'll pause right now and see if you have any questions, and what questions that you may have for me thus far.
Sure, sure. And a lot of the questions I have, I feel like I probably know the answers, or I'm kind of in the ballpark of the answers, but just the types of properties that are best fit for first time commercial real estate investors, without having to bite off more than someone can chew, I guess. What would you say is the best type of property to kind of look at for our first commercial property investment?
So the first thing I like to mention for any investor when you're talking about property, one is location, location, location. You've heard that before, even with residential. So that's not far away. Okay. You want to choose an asset where it makes sense, where you're looking for demographics, the visibility, access to the property, surrounding area, developments. Those are the things that you want to look for when you're looking for the asset. But of course, you want to look at the affordability too. What can you afford? What is your budget? What is your goal when you're acquiring the asset? What is your return on investment that you're looking for? Those are some of the things that you want to think about when you're purchasing. But going back to the location on the asset, there's a few things that you can change on the property and other things you cannot, right? Like where it's located, you want to be very mindful where you buy your property, right? If it's in an urban area or if it's in a rural area. If specifically in down here in South Florida, we're in a very urban area. It's good that we have high traffic counts where there's always typically business around your shopping center or your commercial property. So that's good for your property. Last thing you want to do is have an empty shopping center or empty building where you're struggling to make rents.
Sure.
So location plays a huge factor. Traffic counts play a huge factor. Knowing and understanding demographics is one of those things that most people may overlook when acquiring a property, because demographics tells you the the average household income and what people are able to afford, which will determine on what kind of tenants you're able to put in your property when it pertains to a retail shopping center, or what kind of tenants that you want to put in an industrial property or office building. These are things that you want to ask yourself to make sure that you're positioning yourself for success. Just because you buy a commercial property doesn't mean you're going to automatically make money. You have to do your due diligence.
So
And
it's interesting that you
go
say
ahead.
that, because I'll just kind of interject for a moment. I really didn't think that median household income would play a role in commercial real estate, only because you're not looking to rent the property as a home to those folks that live in the area, because a business owner could live 30 miles away in a completely different area. So can you share with me a bit more about why that median household income is a factor?
Yeah. So specifically, when it comes for retail shopping centers, right? The right mix of tenants can drive across the right traffic. So if you have the right tenants in
Mm-hmm.
there, but you don't have the right demographics, people who are willing to spend. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I go to, like, let's call it a blue collar area, right? For me to put like a high end store in a blue collar area is not wise, right?
Sure.
It I want to make sure that if I am going to be in a blue collar area, I have blue collar type of stores in my plaza. And so they will be patrons, people who will buy at the store that can find it affordable in that store. Because if the average household income or the median household income is high, then I can put higher end restaurants there. I can put, um, stores in that plaza that can demand higher rents, can
Sure.
demand higher price items, and that I can do that. But if it's a
Sure.
lower income area, I'm not going to put like a high-end jewelry store or a restaurant in there. It just wouldn't make sense, because the people in that immediate area who are going to be patronizing that property, they're not going to go there.
Mhm. So you're
So,
looking to attract, sorry, Nicole, just a second. So you're looking to attract uh, potential businesses that may be on the higher end, and you need the residents of the area to be able to afford to spend with those businesses. So it's kind of both sides, right? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, makes sense.
yes,
Makes
absolutely, absolutely. And in the shopping centers specifically, traffic, what drives traffic in the area plays a huge factor when we talk about demographics, right? For example, we call it having an anchor tenant that
mm-hmm,
drives traffic to the area. That
mm-hmm.
anchor tenant can be a national tenant, can be a McDonald's or a national known name that brings the initial traffic in, but the customers that come to the shopping center, they're patronizing all the other stores nearby, because you just need people to come
Mm-hmm,
to the shopping center and spend their money there. And
mm-hmm.
so how the tenant mix, I'm gonna say it again, tenant mix matters.
Okay.
So you don't want to have your whole shopping centers of just beauty salons, right? You want
Sure.
an ice cream shop, a restaurant, because after they eat from the restaurant, they go eat dessert, and after they eat dessert, they might want to have their hair done, maybe for something for the kids, and
Mm-hmm,
so they're able to use that entire shopping center. It's a center where the neighborhood can actually use, and it's
mm-hmm.
not is in some ways a one stop shop center where people can utilize all their services there.
Sure. Nicole, I think you had a question I interjected at the time.
Actually, it was a supporting thought. So
Okay.
I'm looking to open a photo studio in the future, and I do have a location in Miami where my kids are currently going to. In this one plaza, there is a gymnastics studio that's very high traffic. Right next door is a CrossFit center. Across the alley or where the other side of the plaza is a indoor swimming school. There are two ballet studios that are in that shopping plaza. And so for a sports portrait photographer, I'm thinking that would be a great location, but I think I'd also have to look at the the average income as well. I mean,
Correct.
it looks like a great location because there's all of this activity that would benefit from the new service of photography, right? But we
Hmm.
don't know if they can spend because they're already spending money on those individual activities.
Yeah. In your case is really narrowing down your audience and the people that you're looking for. Because photography, I'm thinking definitely more of like event planning, right? Like people for who wants to do weddings and stuff. But maybe you are a photographer for athletes and people who are,
Right. I've niched down
ballet.
to athletics.
Yeah, exactly. To when it comes to athletics. So the way you market your business is going to play a factor in where you want to place your business and being able to advertise to those companies that are directly in your area. And two, is it a need? You have to find out that marketing insight. Is there a need of people who want photography when they're, you know, and for what? Why would they need that
Right.
service while they're,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna run a few tests by surveying the area to see if there is in fact a need, right? So
Yes.
yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so just kind of moving along in terms of commercial financing, Cleveland, I've heard
Hmm.
20% down, 30% down. The lenders focus more on cash flow than the borrower's credit score alone. Just can you just brief us on what we need to be prepared for in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to commercial property, lenders focus more on the property's income than your personal income. In some cases, they don't even care about your credit, right?
Mm,
Some lenders do. Now, they will definitely be looking on like what we call the debt service coverage ratio.
mhm,
That is your DSCR loans. They're looking at, basically how you can comfortably afford, not you, but the property can cash flow and cover
mhm.
the loan payments. And that DSCR loan, banks will look at, 1.25 of the loan. When I say
Okay.
25 times the loan,
Hmm.
that's how much income that you would have to be producing
Hmm.
for them to qualify you for that loan. Because
Okay.
that your cash flow should be enough to cover the loan and then some. Right now, I think
Potential to
banks.
produce, because that's potential to produce, right? Because you could purchase units that are vacant, and so they're just looking at the potential rent in the area that you could command.
I wouldn't necessarily say every bank underwrites differently. The
Okay.
banks that I've dealt with are they normally like to see in place income. Uh,
Okay.
it's a very high risk for a bank to acquire a property that isn't currently performing or doesn't have any active leases or there's a high
Yes.
vacancy on the property.
Okay.
Now, if you decide to acquire a property that has high vacancy, you have to have a very clear plan how you're going to put new tenants into that space and be able to turn it around to have it qualify for your DSCR loan. And
Okay.
so you have to know exactly your plan because you can get in trouble in some sense, money
Mm-hmm.
wise, if you don't have that plan and you execute it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Where that's where you find your deals, right? You find your deals where you find vacancies and then you
Mm.
fix it up real quick. You put in the tenants in place, and then you
Yes.
get the loan, refi, and you're able to tap into the equity right away based on
Mm-hmm.
how you bought the property.
Mm-hmm.
So that plays a huge role.
Yes.
Which, yep, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, so that Burr method kind of applies on this side as well. Um,
Yes.
yeah, okay, I got you. Didn't know that. And
Yeah. And
payments,
go ahead.
then down payment wise, what are we typically looking at there?
Banks right now, I'm gonna say because of the lending environment, they're asking for a little more down, more skin in the game, depending on the type of loan you're going into.
Okay,
But but let's say there's different loan vehicles that you can use. So let's say you're going in as an owner user, you can go into a SBA financing loan where SBA 504, which acquires the property, and a 7A, which allows you to tap into like the working capital, the tenant improvements, those things. You can put as little as no money down, 10% down, right? Because you're running your business. As long as you occupy at least 51% of the space of the
okay.
property, right? So if you're planning to run your business out of the building, great, less down payment,
Mm-hmm,
and as long as you can convince the bank that you have a strong business plan, you can
mm-hmm,
you can acquire that property. And again, it boils down to location, and that way you can maximize on the appreciation. The other side would be on the investment side. On the investment side, your down payments can range anywhere from 30% to 40%, right? The more you
okay.
put down, the more skin in the game you have, the more comfortable the bank is going to feel about lending for that on that property.
Mm-hmm,
Because now that interest rates are higher, it's going to take an investor that's going to be very savvy to make sure that the payments make sense and that the cash flow is able to cover
Mhm.
the loan payments.
Yeah.
So yeah, so 30 to 40%, it really depends on what you're doing with the property.
okay.
Now, going back to the property itself, because we talked about vacancies and things like that, the value of properties, okay, is not like when we take a look at residential properties, like, hey, I love the kitchen, I love this, and I love the way it looks. It's mainly the value is tied to its income, leases, escalations,
Hmm.
tenant quality, lease length, like how long the lease is, right? Is it a
Yes.
5, 10, 20-year lease?
Mm.
That will directly impact the property's worth. Okay.
Okay.
So you can
Yes.
look at a property and you're like, this building is dilapidated. It looks ugly. I don't want it. But if you look at the leases and they're premium triple net leases and they're long-term good leases, hey, you're going to pay a premium
So,
for those leases
yeah.
because
What's
it's
triple net?
producing cash flow.
What does triple net mean?
Triple net is a form of a lease where the tenant covers all the operating expenses. I would let me call it an absolute. Let me say absolute triple net, where they cover not only the all the operating expenses, but also cover the structure and roof. A
Okay.
triple net asset would just be covering majority of your expenses, taxes, insurance, you know, CAM is common area maintenance, which is electricity and lawn, landscaping, so
Mm-hmm.
on and so on. So your operating expenses, they're paying their pro rata share
Mm-hmm.
of their expenses on the building. So
Okay.
there's no operation cost coming out of your pocket. They're paying for it.
Oh,
Wow.
Okay, the water bill, they're paying for that. Sewer, they're
oh.
paying for that.
Uh-huh.
Lights, maintenance, property management, all of it is being paid for. It's nothing coming out of your pocket. They're paying it for their pro rata share.
Okay.
It's high value.
Now, not all leases are structured that way. You have gross leases, modified gross leases, and we can go more in detail about the different lease structures. But the more you're able to pull from the tenant and get from the tenant one commitment, the
Mm-hmm.
time and length on the lease, the amount that they're
Mm-hmm.
dedicated to, that lease will be a strong lease where it raises the value of the property.
Now, do the
Mhm.
tenants typically come with first, last security deposit, and that's then transferred over to you, at least last in security as the new buyer?
Yeah, it's very similar. It depends how you want to formulate your lease. I've seen in cases, yes, you have first, last, and security. Some owners decide not to do security. Some owners just do first and last.
Okay.
It really depends on how flexible you can be with your tenants, and again, your location. Like if you're in a area, a high end area, you should be asking for first, last, and security, right? Like they
Mm-hmm.
should be able to afford it. And this is a high demand area. I have 10 people knocking down my door, so you should
Mm-hmm.
pay that.
Got
But if
it.
you're in a, in a low income, again, pointing back to the demographics, if it's a blue collar area, they may not be able to afford first, last, and security. Maybe you just let
Sure.
them in just for security, maybe first and security.
I
And
understand.
yeah,
Uh-huh. So it's the same. It's exact same. And then I guess property managers, right? You can still outsource everything to a property manager, just like
yep,
residential. Okay.
Mhm.
you got it.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
I have a few other questions, but Nicole, I didn't want to.
Yeah, I have a hard stop at now. Yeah.
You got to go. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry,
Okay.
guys.
No,
Thank
no,
you
no.
so
No, it's okay.
much for
Yeah, if
taking the time, Cleveland. I really appreciate it.
I'll
Yeah,
give
you
you
But
got it.
information, Nicole. I'll text you
yes,
his information. I'll just create a quick group chat and you guys can communicate. And yeah, I just have
Yes.
I think probably just a couple more for you, Cleveland, and then
Yeah, go ahead.
thank you,
I'm here.
Danielle. Okay,
yes,
have a good one.
welcome.
Bye.
Mhm.
Bye, Nicole.
Bye. Okay, so then just the typical closing time, is it like 60 days, 90 days? And then another question is like hard money lenders, kind of the non-traditional financing. Do you see that being used sometimes with these purchases as well?
Yes, absolutely. You have our money lenders, you have bridge loans, you have all kinds of lenders that are willing to, help fund your commercial real estate project. So it really
Okay.
depends on what you're presenting to them and
Okay.
where the property is located and the condition of the property. Some hard
Okay.
money lenders, they don't care. As long as they're getting their 12%, they're
Yeah,
like,
right, right.
hey,
And
give me
they,
40 or 50% down
I
and
know.
I
Yeah.
don't care what you do. Just just
And then seller financing too. You see that? Seller
if what?
finance? You see
Yeah.
seller?
In,
Okay.
in fact, when it comes to seller financing, it's where we've done a lot of our deals.
Okay.
Um, my very last deal in Pembroke Pines, we
Mm-hmm.
managed to get a seller financing deal done. Just because interest rates right now are very difficult to manage for a lot of people at 7%. So right
Yes.
now, people are more comfortable talking to the seller, and as long as the seller has very little to no debt, then they can do
Yes.
the seller
Right.
financing.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, we've done quite, a lot of our deals have been done through seller financing.
And then, so this is kind of an off-brand question, but just, you'll go into a restaurant that's in a little strip plaza and um, let's say they don't serve alcohol and they typically say, oh, we can't serve alcohol. I know sometimes that's because of them not having a license, but then could it also be because the property is in an area where alcohol can't be sold? So as an investor, you have to maybe consider that too, that your tenants won't be able to maybe utilize a liquor license that they may have in your strip mall?
Yeah, great question. That leads to the question of zoning and property use,
Okay.
right? Like when you're looking for a prospective tenant and they're coming and they're calling you, if they're opening a restaurant, most likely most restaurants like to serve liquor. They
Yes.
should have some level of a liquor license. If they don't present that to you, then that's one thing. But the use of the property, it'll let you know what can be used.
Okay.
Whether the city will approve that use.
Okay.
And if they will, by the time they make their move, they'll get a CEO certificate of occupancy to see, in their business tax receipt, and then they'll get it as long as they apply for the liquor license.
Okay.
That can work out. So yeah, it's a zoning and property use question. Um,
Okay.
yeah, based on the area.
Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I mean, this is all great. And then I would imagine when it comes to like exit strategies, you don't necessarily have to buy and hold indefinitely. I'm sure you have investors who invest with the purpose of sticking in for a bit and then, kind of selling for some sort of appreciation. So these properties will appreciate over time as well.
Yeah, exactly. So you have two appreciation, what I like to call is forced appreciation and just your traditional appreciation. Hold, buy and hold and wait 10,
Mhm.
20 plus years and you gain the appreciation. But remember, the value of your property, it can be done with forced appreciation. Looking at a property, low
Mhm.
leases, you buy it right, and then you're
Mhm.
able to upgrade the leases and the tenants in that plaza, and you've just increased the value of this property immediately by $500,000 or not, 50%,
Yeah.
100%, right?
Okay.
So it really depends on the play that you're looking to do when you acquire a property. So yes, you can do fix and flip, or you can have the buy and hold strategy.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of buy and hold
Yes.
because you're able to capitalize on the cash flow of the property and the
Mhm.
income, and it's a very powerful tool because of that forced appreciation that could be where you can raise rents and improve the property, and optimizing your expenses, make sure they're as low as possible. But I think there's one more thing that we didn't talk about is, your due diligence period when you are acquiring a property, right?
Mhm.
And your due diligence period is once you go under contract. What should you do? What are the things that you should be looking for? And so, like before you close on a property, you should always be reviewing your leases. It's not, hey, I love this building, it looks good. Review the leases. We talked about the most valuable part about a commercial property is the leases. You want to know what's going on. Are
Mhm.
they month to month? Are the leases going to be expiring soon? That is
Yes.
a big thing that you want to consider because, hey, how do you know this person's going to leave in a year or two? There goes your income. So
Sure.
if you can find a way to find value and understand the leases, that's going to matter. Property condition, where it's located, how can you position this property? Um, One of the things I like to mention is access, how easy it is to get in this
Mhm.
property, right? Um, so due diligence is very important. Tenant payment history,
Rent roll.
knowing if
Yes.
they're paying on time. Yep, rent roll, knowing if they're paying on time.
Mhm.
Um, Environmental, phase ones.
Mhm.
Those are things that you want to take a look at when it comes to, acquiring your property as well.
So here's one thing I'm completely clueless on, and obviously, if you don't spend time, you just have no clue. But in the strip mall, let's say that you just sold, the plaza you just sold, what are average rents? You said Pembroke Pines. I don't know if it's east or west, but what are average rents? What are we even talking about? And what tools could you use as an investor to say, okay, I know I could lease each unit for X number of dollars in this particular area? Are there sites? But first, average rents. What do we typically see in that area? Do you know? I know it varies.
Great question. So the way we go about average rents, we normally go based on the price per square foot for each property. So if I'm renting a unit for 1,000 square feet, I can say, hey, I can charge anywhere between $18 to $22 a square foot gross, right?
Okay.
How do you get that information? Great
Mhm.
question. You get that information by either one, software, which is not the best way to get your data. Two,
Uh,
leasing agents.
okay,
Leasing
yeah.
agents who are very active, not any leasing agents, but leasing agents who are specifically tied to that city, tied to
Mhm.
that demographic and market area. And if they do a lot of business, they should be able to give you a ballpark figure about where they're signing leases.
Yes.
Okay. And so they might be able to sign it at $16 a square foot. And if you say, hey, I'm going to bring my rents up to, X, leasing
Mhm.
agent can say, no, I've never signed
Right.
a lease that for that much money. There's no way.
Yes.
But if you say, hey, I'm thinking about buying a property, and right now the leases I have, rents are X.
Mhm.
Leasing agent can say, wow, those leases are low. You can at least get
Oh, yeah.
50% more day one,
Okay. Okay.
right?
Mhm.
And so having a good leasing agent that is aware of the market, who has a pulse on the market, that can help. You can use other tools like CoStar, Crexy, LoopNet to
Mm.
give you a base idea
Mhm.
of the market. But again, those data platforms aren't always accurate because
Yes, I know.
that data is only as good as who the people provide. Like if I'm a broker, it depends on if I decide to provide them the information,
Yes. Yes.
right? If I'm not providing CoStar or LoopNet or Crexy the information, they're not going to have it.
Yes. And it won't be current. No.
It won't be current.
Okay. So this is awesome. I'm thinking before we end, can you just share two more things? One, definitely your contact information and how some of my students could reach out to you. And then two, how do you work with your potential clients? Example, when I work with a realtor, they set me up on a list based on my buy box, and I just start getting, properties in my inbox, and they're on
Hmm.
the MLS, and I can review them. And if I'm interested in one, I reach out to my agent. Is that how you work? And how can people reach out to you?
Yes, absolutely. They would reach out to me. They provide me their contact information and their email. We would add you to our database where every listing that comes to our desk, you'd get first dibs on it. You
Mhm.
would be able to see all the commercial properties that we're bringing out to market. So that's one way that you can contact me. Just contact me, and the way you can reach me is, again, my name is Cleveland St. Prey. My phone number is 954-661-4170, and my email address is it's a very long email address, but if you can see my name on here, it is literally my first dot last name at svn.com. S as in Sam, V as in Victor, N as in Nancy.com. And I'll be happy to add you to our database to be able to see our inventory whenever we get some new inventory.
Okay.
Um, in regards to working with you, if there's something that you're specifically looking for or a geographic location that you desire to be in, feel free to call and we can walk through those conversations and see if I can find something for you. That initial call is very easy. It gives me your criteria and we can start shopping
To
from
that
that
point.
point.
Now, is it important to be pre-qualified or go through any of that with a lender first before working with you? I know we're looking at DSCR loans, but just curious, any advice there?
Yes, ideally, I'd suggest that you do. At least get some level of pre-qualification about how much you're able to afford.
Mhm.
And again, you don't have to go real big, like the multi-million dollar. You can find
Yes.
properties in the, six, seven, $800,000 range, right?
Okay.
Just to get started. And
Yes.
then as you start getting your foot wet into the commercial real estate space, then you begin to expand and
Okay.
one becomes two, two to four, four to eight, and et cetera. So
Yeah.
just getting started is where it matters. So yeah, I would say get started with a lender,
Okay.
find out where you can get your capital, and have some capital partners here that I can connect you with that can
Okay.
walk you through.
I was going to ask that. Okay, so your service, SVN, maybe offers somewhat of a one-stop shop. You can get lending. You might be able to
Yeah,
connect like some leasing agents that you mentioned, kind of if they have no connections, they can work with you. Okay, okay, good.
right, right. You got it.
Awesome. No, this is perfect, and it's certainly helped me. I will you have my email address. I'll talk to some folks on my side and kind of see where we might be ballpark spending wise. I know we have to come with a huge chunk as a down payment, and I'll send that to you, and then hopefully we'll be able to work together, and hopefully Nicole will do the same, and we'll get some business going.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Again, yeah, it's definitely a pleasure connecting with you. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me on this questionnaire, and I'm here if you have any more questions.
Okay. All right, Cleveland. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good week.
All right, you too.
Bye
Bye.
bye.